Okay, so welcome back, Damaboots, and welcome, new Damaboot, or something. That's what I go with, that's the terminology we've been kind of using. The Damaboots community is a little thing.
Okay.
So, right off the bat, again, I'm gonna tell you, and I'm gonna put it out there, that the Army's Chief of Chaplains has called on all chaplains to set aside the weekend of September 20th through the 22nd, and during our regular services this week, for prayer in order to, and I quote, focus us on the rise of suicides within the Army family, and to lead our units and communities of faith to pray alongside us. So that's what we are going to. It's probably a good thing that I was already planning on talking about right meditation. We're in the middle of, or actually almost towards the end of our little series on the Eightfold Noble Path. Because right meditation is also usually translated as right mindfulness. Yeah. And so what we're going to be doing today is being very mindful of issues around suicide and how we can be better mindful about the people around us to help make sure that we are seeing what we should see, so that we are doing our part to stop this.
Yeah.
We can't obviously do everything, but we can do what we can, and we should do what we can. So, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is last week we had talked in Right Effort about the Buddha's kind of meditation that gets us out of the dullness or drowsiness, one of the unwholesome qualities. That one was with Samurai Jack. I totally recommend using it because that service is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of my dumber services, but it's also one of my favorites.
Nice.
But so, in order to combat dullness or drowsiness, which is part of the unwholesome qualities, the Buddha recommends that we meditate on our own death. Now, obviously, we are not doing that because we want to die. We are not doing that because we are seeking our own death. We are doing that because we need to be mindful of the simple fact that every moment our life is getting shorter. Every moment we are one step closer to the grave. Every moment we have the opportunity while we are still here to make use of that time, right? So meditating on death is not about trying to die or wanting to die. It's about wanting to live. It's about saying, I only have this one chance, this one rebirth as a human being. I don't know what I'm going to be reborn as next time. I don't know what the cycle of rebirth is going to have for me, when the time comes. But I do know what I have right now. And I have the opportunity to live, the opportunity to practice, and the opportunity to be mindful, to be aware of what's going on around me. So, the many ways that we contemplate our own death, they bring us into focus, right? They really focus us on that fact that our lives are short and we have to make that effort. Now, I don't have a list of the names of all 139 soldiers, 68 sailors, 60 airmen, and 58 Marines who committed suicide in the last year. Not that I believe those numbers are accurate, I'm pretty sure they're low. I don't have a list like I did for the Cielo Vista meditation that we did. So I'm not gonna sit there and try and chant everybody's name or ring the bell once for each and every single one of these people. I do think that with what we do, with how much we do, between training and taskings and missions and such, it's really easy for us, even as Damaboots, to become less aware than we should be, right? To be just so drawn into the task or the mission or whatever that we forget to look around us and really be aware of what's going on. We forget to be mindful of of those to the left and the right of us. And as as much as the military is kind of a family, and we should have the potential to be a conduit for connection, I think we really get wrapped up in stuff. And if anything, the chief of chaplains call for us to focus on the rising numbers of suicides is a nice little call for us to, it's a nice invitation for us to be mindful, for us to say, okay, mission, sure, yep, that's a thing, but so are people. And we need the easy way to increase suicide numbers is to not care about people, to not build those connections, to not build those bridges, to not be mindful of those around us who are probably suffering. Right? I mean, granted, we are all suffering in the ultimate sense of the word, but those who are suffering on the ground in ways that we maybe could see if we looked, we could see if we were aware, we could see if we were mindful, and sometimes we're just not. The reasons are understandable. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh yeah, I've got so much on my plate, so much to do, I just don't have time. Is that a valid reason? No. Is it understandable? Absolutely. So, when there's no time to be cohesive, when we're stuck on all of that stuff, right? When somebody is suicidal, more often than not, when we see a suicide attempt or a suicide ideation, it's not a cry for help. It's a cry for connection. It's a cry for somebody who wants us to reach out, who wants to reach out to us and build that bridge. And we can do that if we're mindful of it, if we're aware of it, right? And that's what keeps them alive. That's what keeps all of us alive. Those who are around us, right? That's a good part of the reason why the Buddha, when Ananda was saying, oh, friendship is like, half of the holy life. The Buddha's like, no. Friendship is all of the holy life, right? Having those good friends around you who can be aware of what's going on with you. Sometimes they'll call you out on your terrible failures, and sometimes they'll, rejoice in all of your great successes. But having those friends, having those connections is so absolutely crucial. And that's what the Buddha was getting at with that. And that's what the Buddha wants, that's what the Buddha is saying when he's talking about being mindful and aware, is we have to look at what's going on around us. We can't just be stuck in our own heads. We can't be stuck in our own worlds. So we, as Dhamma Buddhas, we have that built into our faith. We have that built into the Buddha's teachings. We can use that, and we should use that. We should be more aware of what's going on around us. Because the numbers here on Fort Bliss, not just, completed suicides, we've had several. We've also had a ridiculous number of ideations. We've had a ridiculous number of attempts. Whether they were completed or not, that's another story. But it really begs the question of what are we, not just Dhamma Buddhas, because I think it's a problem across society. I think it's a problem across the military, across the army. We don't pay attention, right? We don't focus on these kinds of things anywhere near enough to start to say, that guy over there is isolated. Maybe I should go and try and build that connection. Right? Would that help? I think it would. Because having those connections, that's what keeps people alive. And out of compassion, that's something that we need to be really taking a good hard look at and saying, am I doing enough? Is my effort right? Is my am I practicing the right mindfulness? Am I practicing mindfulness in a meaningful way that is helping? Right? Am I aware of what's going on around me? We can ask ourselves these questions, and the Buddha's pretty clear that that's part of right mindfulness, is asking those questions, being aware, right? So where we fail is in not being aware and not being mindful of those around us, not making that meaningful, compassionate action, right? Not trying hard enough. And so the thing that I wanted to do, and what I don't usually chant this particular text, at least not publicly. I chant it in private all the time. Um, this is kind of, I brought it out because it is a call to mindfulness in and of its own self. Not particularly related to suicide, but we can definitely extrapolate and extend it out. So the text itself is written by the monk Kakuban in the 12th century. He was concerned about the kind of corruption that he saw in some of his fellow monks even back then, because we all know monks aren't perfect. Monks are human too. They fail just as hard as the rest of us. They just get more chances to practice. So what he was looking at was all of the ways that monks in his temple and his part of the Buddhist world had completely failed. And one of those, the one that is probably the most meaningful for our conversation today, is hearing of those who are impoverished. We have been disinterested and felt abhorrence. That's some classic aversion right there, right? We are even back in his day, the monks would take a look at people who were suffering and say, I don't want to be part of that. Oof, no. Right? What kind of monks they are, I don't know, but he was angry enough about it that he put it in this giant text called the Mitsugon-in Confession, sometimes also added repentance. And there are still temples that chant this on the daily. So when we aren't mindful and we don't hear the cries of the suicidal, in this context, in the context of hearing those who are impoverished, are we or are we not completely disinterested in those who are spiritually impoverished by their lack of meaningful connection? Are we or are we not feeling that abhorrence ourselves? And do we or do we not need to get past that through being mindful, through being aware, through making that effort? I think we do. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to do the chant, and I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to ring the bell 8 times. I was debating all day what number that was going to be. Like, do I do 8? Do I do 4? Do I try and do 325, which is the recorded numbers?
Yeah.
It's going to be 8. So, again, I don't typically chant this one in public. I may be a little bit more nervous than I would like to think, which is a perfect chance for me to try and be mindful and aware of where I am. So bear with me. It's a nice little piece. You have the words in front of you. Dhamma Booths who are watching this at a later time, I'm going to put the link to that same text in the description. You guys will see it there. Mitsugon-in Confession warera sangesu mushirei kono kata mousou ni matowarete shuzai o tsukuru shinkui no gotsu ni mitendo shite ayamatte muryou fuzen no go kasu chinzai o kenrin shite seyo gyozuzu kokoro ni makasete hoitsu ni shite kai o jisezu shiba fun ni okoshite ninniku narazu okugeta yo shochite shojin narazu shin ni sanran shite zazen sezu jisou ni hai shite eoshu sezu tsune ni kaku no gotoku no rokuro no gyo o tai shite kaiteru ten sanzu no go o tsukuru Nao biku ni katte gara no kegashi katachi o shamon ni hishite shinsei o kukuru tokoro no kaihon wa wasurete jisezu kaku subeku ritsugi wa hai shite kono koto nashi shobutsu no en no shita no tokoro hajizu bosatsu no kuno suru toko surezeru Yuge shogo shite itazura ni 親しみ、善行を務めずして悪行為と殴りを縁としては自徳を参じ、病の求めんとして多罪を阻止。聖徳の者を見ては嫉妬抱き、無徳の人を見ては狂慢の所ず、糞尿のところを聞いては希望を起こし、貧乏の類を聞いては常に恩利すこと、さらに殺し誤って殺す無情の目、あらわに取る規則に取る他人の罪、触れても触れずしても非凡の行を犯す。串三互いに相続し仏を観念するときは反念の腰、教を独自するときは文句を誤る。もし善行のなせば愚僧に受し、書いて輪廻生じの縁となる行重座が知ると知らざると化すところの核のごとくの無料の罪、今三宝に対して皆をつるし立てまつる、慈悲愛民して少女せしめたまえ、ないし崩壊の諸の主情三号所作の核のごとくの罪、我皆愛変わってごとく参列、さらにまたその報いを受けしめざれ、南無残儀残儀無料諸凡罪、南無残儀残儀無料諸凡罪、南無残儀残儀無料諸凡罪。So I'm going to close out the sermon with this. Bells are often used as a way to invite. They invite people to weddings, they invite people to services, they invite people to chant, they invite awareness. Let us use that ringing of the bell as our own personal invitation, our own personal welcoming us to be more mindful of those around us, welcoming those of us who have the ability, who find us in that position, to make those connections with others. Let us be mindful of that.